Have you ever noticed how little of your life you can actually remember? Not the big moments, not the stories you've told so many times, they've become part of your identity. The rest. The ordinary Tuesday 3 years ago. The breakfast you ate on a random morning in October. The conversation you had while waiting for a traffic light to change. The exact feeling of being alive on a day that seemed completely forgettable. It's strange when you think about it. You were there. You experienced every second. Yet most of it is gone, or at least it feels gone. You can probably recall a few scenes without effort: a birthday cake glowing in a dark room, the smell of rain drifting through an open window, a summer afternoon that seemed endless, the first person who made your heart race, the first person who broke it. Those memories appear almost instantly, but the moment you try to go further, the fog arrives. Thousands of mornings disappear, thousands of conversations vanish, entire years collapse into a handful of images. And that's the mystery. Your life is the only thing you've ever truly experienced, so why can you remember so little of it? At first, this sounds like a question about memory, but the deeper you go, the more it becomes a question about what the human mind was actually built to do. Because we tend to imagine memory as a storage system, a giant archive hidden somewhere inside the skull, a perfect record of everything we've ever seen, heard, felt, and done. But that isn't what researchers have found. In fact, the more scientists study memory, the stranger it becomes. The brain was never designed to preserve your life. It was designed to help you survive it. And survival has very different priorities. Imagine carrying a camera that records every second of every day, every meal, every text message, every face you pass, every moment spent staring out a car window, every random thought before falling asleep. Nothing is lost. Nothing is forgotten. At first, that sounds amazing. Then imagine trying to find anything inside that mountain of information. The problem isn't storage, it's usefulness. And your brain faces a much bigger version of that problem every second. Your eyes alone send far more information than you consciously experience. Sounds come and go without entering awareness. Sensations rise and disappear before you notice them. At any given moment, reality contains more detail than the brain could ever meaningfully process. So the brain does something that feels like a flaw. It deletes, filters, compresses, ignores, not because it's broken, because it has to. In 1885, the German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus became one of the first people to systematically study forgetting. He spent years memorizing meaningless syllables and testing himself on them. What he discovered was surprising. Forgetting isn't some rare accident, it's the default. Information fades rapidly unless something gives the brain a reason to keep it. More than a century later, neuroscience keeps pointing in the same direction. Memory isn't the brain's way of storing the past, it's the brain's way of preparing for the future. The question isn't, what should I remember forever? The question is, what might be useful later? And suddenly forgetting looks very different. Forgetting isn't a failure of memory, it's one of the memory's most important functions. Because if everything stayed equally vivid, nothing would stand out. Every moment would compete with every other moment. Every detail would demand attention. And if everything matters, nothing does. But that still leaves another mystery. Some things survive. A sentence someone said 15 years ago, the expression on a stranger's face, the pattern sunlight made on a bedroom wall when you were 8. Why that moment? Why not the thousands surrounding it? Part of the answer lies in something we rarely notice. The brain doesn't remember life evenly. It remembers difference, contrast, change. Imagine a road you travel every day. At first, every turn feels distinct. You notice the buildings, the signs, the details. But after enough repetitions, individual journeys begin to disappear. They blend together, not because they were meaningless, because they became predictable. The brain is constantly searching for what's new, a broken pattern, an unexpected event, something that doesn't fit yesterday's model of the world. And that's one reason childhood feels so enormous when we look back on it. Almost everything is happening for the first time. A supermarket feels endless. A playground feels like a kingdom. An insect can hold your attention for 20 minutes. A cardboard box can become an entire universe. Researchers studying memory have repeatedly found that novelty increases the likelihood that experiences will be encoded and retained, which makes sense. For most of human history, something new might be important: a new food source, a new threat, a new opportunity, a new place. Novelty meant information, information meant survival, and novelty leaves fingerprints in memory. Then something changes, slowly, almost invisibly. Life becomes familiar. You learn the streets, the routines, the rhythms. Tomorrow starts looking suspiciously similar to yesterday. Days begin folding into one another. Weeks become months. Months become years. And people start saying something strange. Time goes faster now. You've probably heard it. Maybe you've felt it. A decade that seemed impossible to imagine somehow disappears in what feels like a few pages. Many researchers think memory may be part of the reason, not because time literally speeds up, but because memory helps create the feeling of how much time has passed. A year filled with first experiences creates many mental landmarks. A year filled with repetition creates fewer. When you look back, one year appears dense, the other appears compressed. The first seems longer in memory, the second seems shorter, not because it was shorter, because there is less memory holding it open. In other words, part of what we call time may actually be memory viewed from a distance. But novelty isn't the only thing that survives. Emotion leaves its own marks. Think about the memories that still feel alive. The phone call that changed everything. The goodbye you weren't ready for. The day you fell in love. The day you realized something was over. The psychologist William James once wrote that experience is what we agree to attend to. Emotion forces attention. And attention is one of memory's favorite ingredients. Modern neuroscience has shown that emotionally significant experiences often recruit systems in the brain that make memories more likely to stick. Fear, love, joy, embarrassment, grief, belonging. The mind pays special attention to moments that seem important because important moments tend to have consequences. Remember this. You might need it later. But beneath all of this lies the strangest discovery of all. The memories you keep are not recordings, they're reconstructions. In the 1970s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus began demonstrating how surprisingly flexible memory can be. People could be led to remember details that never happened, sometimes entire events. Not because they were lying, because memory doesn't work like a video file. Every time you remember something, your brain rebuilds it. Piece by piece, you recover some details. You fill in others. You unconsciously update the story. Memory feels like replaying the past, but biologically, it's often closer to rewriting it, which leads to an uncomfortable question. If most of your life is forgotten, and the parts you remember are constantly being reconstructed, then what exactly is your sense of self made from? Most of us feel like a continuous person, the same I, moving through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and beyond. But much of that feeling comes from memory. The mind gathers fragments, a few victories, a few embarrassments, moments of pride, moments of regret, stories you've told friends, stories you've told yourself. Then it stitches them together into something that feels solid, an identity. And when you stop to think about it, that's astonishing. The person you believe yourself to be may be built from a tiny fraction of everything you've ever lived through. A few hundred memories standing in for millions of moments. Yet those fragments influence almost everything: your confidence, your fears, your relationships, your ambitions, the future you imagine, the risks you avoid, who you think you are, may depend less on everything that happened to you and more on the handful of experiences your brain decided were worth keeping, or the handful you kept revisiting, the stories repeated so many times they became structural, the stories that slowly turned into you. And then there's one final twist. Maybe forgetting isn't just useful, maybe it's merciful. There are people with an extraordinarily rare condition called highly superior autobiographical memory. They can recall astonishing amounts of their personal past with remarkable detail. From the outside, it sounds like a superpower, but many people who possess it describe something else: a burden, because the past doesn't fade the way it does for most of us. Old embarrassments remain vivid, old arguments remain accessible, old grief remains close. For the rest of us, forgetting creates distance, and distance changes pain. Not always completely, not always quickly, but enough. A breakup that once felt unbearable becomes a story. A humiliation becomes a memory. A wound becomes a scar. Without forgetting, the past would never stop arriving. Every mistake would stay fresh. Every loss would remain immediate. Every regret would sit beside you forever. We spend a lot of time celebrating memory, but forgetting may be doing just as much work. A mind that remembers everything risks becoming trapped inside its own history. A mind that forgets gains the ability to move forward, which brings us back to the original question: why can't you remember most of your life? Because your brain was never trying to preserve your life in perfect detail. It was trying to help you navigate it. So it keeps certain things, compresses others, lets countless moments dissolve. Years become stories. Stories become scenes. Scenes become feelings, and feelings become the person who remembers them. The strangest part is that memory and importance are not the same thing. Some of the most important moments of your life may never become memories at all. A casual conversation that changed your direction. A passing comment that arrived at exactly the right time. A decision that felt ordinary but quietly altered everything afterward. Most turning points don't announce themselves. They rarely feel dramatic. They don't come with music. They don't come with certainty. Usually they arrive disguised as normal days. Another afternoon, another conversation, another choice. Only years later do you realize the road bent there. And maybe that's what makes this whole subject so fascinating. We spend so much energy chasing memorable moments, the milestones, the achievements, the photographs, the stories we'll someday tell. But most of life isn't made from those moments. Most of life happens between them: the mornings, the routines, the walks, the meals, the ordinary hours that seem too small to matter. Yet those hours are quietly building the person you become, whether you remember them or not. Maybe memory isn't the best measure of a life. Maybe attention is. Maybe presence is. Because one day, almost all of this will fade. The details, the routines, the names of places you've forgotten you've been, the ordinary mornings you assumed would always be there, even for you. But forgotten doesn't mean meaningless. A tree doesn't remember every leaf it has ever grown, yet every leaf helped build the tree. An ocean doesn't keep track of every wave, Yet every wave belongs to the ocean, and maybe we're not so different. Maybe most of your life disappears into silence not because it lacked value, but because it already gave you what it came to give. It shaped your instincts, your habits, your fears, your loves, your way of seeing the world. It became part of the person making choices right now. And once an experience has truly become part of you, memory may no longer need to carry it. The evidence is already there, not in what you can recall, but in who you've become. The work was never to remember everything, the work was to be changed by it.